Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. Here to talk about an upcoming fight that I've been waiting for a while. I consider it one of the biggest heavyweight fights in recent memory, and that's going to be Vitali Klitschko against Odlanier Solis. I view this fight as a toss-up. Let me just say, uh, people I trust and respect a great deal, the folks on my channel page, they question me on this pick. So just understand there is a diversity of opinion. But before I go further, let me just say the opinion you should follow should be your own. Let me also say that one of the reasons why YouTube is so popular and so exciting, right, is because the people on YouTube, the entire boxing community, not just me, but all the boxing pundits and people sitting on their sofas making their picks, we're outside the mainstream media. We're outsiders, so we aren't beholden to the powers that be in boxing. I'm not trying to sign Vitali Klitschko, Odlanier Solis, David Haye, Vladimir Klitschko to appear on a TV station. I'm not begging anybody for interviews. We can actually talk straight. I'm not trying to curry favor with any promoter. Bob Arum, Golden Boy, love you all. But online, we here in 2011 get to actually listen to other fight fans directly, right? So we're freer than the boxing commentators to call out fighters, and that's what I'm going to do here because I don't like what's going on in boxing. Just a momentary editorial here. Let me just say this. David Haye, as I understand it, is willing to fight Vladimir Klitschko. All he wants is a 50% split. If you look at David Haye's pay-per-view numbers, you know that he deserves that 50% split. David Haye, quite frankly, is one of the most popular boxers in the sport. He delivers pay-per-view. His fight against Audley Harrison was a big success, in part because of David Haye's popularity. David Haye is willing to fight a very tough fight to help unify the heavyweight championship. All he wants is the split that he's entitled to, 50%, not 51, not 49. Now, I believe the Klitschko brothers, and I have a lot of respect for the Klitschko brothers' abilities, but I believe the Klitschko brothers are playing a very bad game on the public. I think boxing fans, like me, like you, should really be outraged at it. I believe Vladimir Klitschko understands that all his big talk about it being an easy payday and stuff like that is meaningless. In actuality, it's a tough fight. He knows he has chin problems. He knows he's been down multiple times in fights, getting knocked down by guys like Sam Peter, right? He knows he's dealing with a guy who hits at least as hard as Sam Peter, who has hand speed and athleticism that, quite frankly, Sam Peter can't even dream about. And so he knows this is a tough fight. So I believe, unfortunately, the game the Klitschko brothers are playing is a bait and switch. I don't believe Vladimir Klitschko wants to fight David Haye. That's why he's talking about now fighting Derek Chisora in a mismatch, right? And I believe what the Klitschko brothers would prefer is for the non-chinny Klitschko, Vitali Klitschko, to actually fight David Haye for big money. So what are they doing? Vladimir Klitschko won't agree to a 50% split with David Haye. Vitali Klitschko, who realizes that the fighter I'm about to talk about, Odlanier Solis, is a very tough opponent, right? Extremely tough. Vitali Klitschko is trying to avoid his mandatory, Odlanier Solis. He would prefer to fight David Haye for big money. And so, of course, he has offered lowball, servant type money to Odlanier Solis during their purse discussions, right? And of course, the Klitschkos jointly released a statement saying that either of them would be willing to fight David Haye. Hey, Vitali, you're not available. You have a belt, you have an obligation, you have a mandatory. You shouldn't be talking about David Haye, right? Your brother, if he really believes he's the best heavyweight, he's the one who's free to fight David Haye. Stop the BS, right? If you don't want to fight Odlanier Solis, then my advice to you is to give up the belt. But don't insult fight fans like me by including yourself in the David Haye conversation. That's ridiculous. And don't insult mandatory opponents by offering them scraps for a heavyweight fight where a lot of hardcore fans like me will be watching that fight, not just for you, but also for your opponent, Odlanier Solis. So my advice to the Klitschkos is stop insulting your legacy. Stop insulting us fans. Vladimir, if you really believe that David Haye is an easy payday, then take that payday. Fight David Haye, right? If you're afraid to fight David Haye, stop hiding behind your brother. And let me say this about Vitali. Vitali, I believe you are the best heavyweight on the planet right now. Certainly you have a better chin than your brother. Why don't you go out there and prove it against your mandatory? Stop trying to dodge your mandatory by trying to claim that you're interested in fighting David Haye. And let me also say this too, to the promoter of the Klitschkos and to the Klitschkos themselves, stop having guys like Derek Chisora say that boxing won't miss David Haye. You know what, Derek? Boxing won't miss you. Stop calling out David Haye's name. You have nothing to do with David Haye. Keep your nose out of negotiations David Haye is having with Vladimir Klitschko. If Vladimir Klitschko wants an easy payday, he'll fight you, Derek Chisora. He'll avoid David Haye. Now let's talk about this fight. You know what? I think this fight is going to be the biggest test that Vitali Klitschko has had since he lost to Lennox Lewis, right? Understand that Odlanier Solis has really one of the absolute best amateur pedigrees in history. He should have been the Cuban representative for the 2000 Olympics. He was actually the Cuban heavyweight champion in 1999 and 2000. He had beaten, the legendary Felix Savon, who significantly is a very tall fighter, right? Savon's taller than 6'5". He handles Savon's height. He was the Cuban heavyweight champion, and unfortunately politics took over. Cuba sent Savon to the Olympics in 2000 to give him a chance to win his third Olympic gold medal. Savon did just that, beating Sultan Ibragimov, right? Savon should not have been there. He had lost to Solis. Solis was actually the guy who should have gone. So Solis, of course, follows that up by winning the World Championship in 2001. He beats Sultan Ibragimov. He also beats David Haye on his way to that 2001 title. Then, of course, he comes back in 2004, represents Cuba in the Olympics, and, of course, he wins the Olympic gold medal. This guy is an elite talent. I would encourage people to compare and contrast Monty Barrett's fight against David Haye, right, where, granted, David Haye wins the fight, but David Haye's on the canvas for part of that fight. Of course, people are calling that a slip. If it's a slip, I still maintain it's a slip after David Haye got hit with a punch. But David Haye at times had a tussle with Monty Barrett. Compare and contrast Monty Barrett's recent draw, if you want to call it a draw, with David Tua, right, against Odlanier Solis's 2-round deconstruction of Monty Barrett in Barrett's hometown of New York City. What you're going to find is that Odlanier Solis has a high guard, so he's going to give a taller fighter like Vitali Klitschko problems, right? Because Vitali won't be able to just hit him in the face with a jab, right? Solis is a defensive master. Those jabs are going to bounce off his gloves. It's a different fight style than David Haye. Solis will be coming forward. He's not going to try to stay outside of the jab. Rather, he's going to try to get inside of Vitali's jab. He's going to try to hunt down Vitali Klitschko. How do we know this? Look at how he hunted down Monty Barrett. He's coming forward on Monty Barrett. You're going to see that Barrett's punches bounce off his gloves, right? He's excellent at throwing very short, powerful shots. Look at his right hand. Now understand, because Solis wears baggy trunks, you can't see the power in his legs. Solis is a very heavy-handed guy. It just doesn't look that way because he's throwing short punches and you can't see him leaning on his legs to do it. But every time his right hand hits Monty Barrett, Barrett is badly hurt, right? Barrett is practically gone before the fight's waved off in the second round, right? Solis is coming inside. It's nonstop pressure. He's a guy who relies on his arms for defense as opposed to head movement. He doesn't bob and weave. He conserves his energy, right? And so eventually he walks you down. What's going to happen with Vitali Klitschko, who up until now has been able to keep guys off of him with the jab? Take a look at the Sam Peter fight where Sam Peter quits on his stool. What's going to happen is Vitali's going to find that this guy is coming forward with defensive skills that his recent opponents have lacked, right? Shannon Briggs didn't really cover up his face. Chris Arreola got hit in the face repeatedly. Take a look at Odlanier Solis' face. You're going to see that he doesn't get hit that much, right? The punches bounce off of his hands. Not only that, he's a master of timing. He's not only a guy who can counterpunch you, but his timing is so impeccable that he's able to get off clean counterpunches. And of course, Solis isn't just a headhunter. He's a guy who also goes to the body. So he has chopped down opponents with simply body shots. He can take you out up top. He can take you out down below. I don't know who wins this fight. I know the public doesn't seem to know who Solis is. They don't have any kind of appreciation for the fact that this guy has beaten multiple world champions in the amateurs, nor do they seem to realize, including David Haye, nor do they seem to realize that this guy actually beat Felix Savon multiple times, and Savon is widely viewed as the most decorated amateur in recent memory. But I know that Vitali Klitschko knows who he is. That's why Vitali keeps trying to avoid this fight. Keep in mind, too, that Vitali is able to dodge punches on the inside by just leaning his head back, right? That's a very dangerous strategy against a guy who knows how to get inside. Because what's going to happen is, Vitali's accustomed, because he's very heavy-handed and has a very high knockout percentage, he's accustomed to guys being off of him. So when they throw punches from distance, he can just lean his head back, avoid the punch, then he comes back with his own punch, and it's very fast because he's not disengaging his hand from a high, guard. Now understand that against Solis, what happens when Solis gets inside and Vitali just leans back trying to avoid the punch? Solis is going to be right here, and he's going to have Vitali naked. Let me also point out, too, that it is a skill just in terms of dealing with your weight. To have the kind of game where you have a high guard, and then you're able to literally throw a short punch and have a lot of leverage behind it, right? Don't sleep on the fact that a big part of Solis's game is the leverage he has. He doesn't have to wind up to throw punches, right? He has figured out a fight style where he's leaning to the point where when he throws a very even keel punch, that punch has a lot of power behind it. So I would encourage you to look at the comments of his last opponent, who also is tall. Solis feasts on tall opponents, right? Felix Savon. His last victim was Ray Austin, right? I want you to read Ray Austin's comments following that fight on how hard it was to deal with Savon. Just do a Google search for Ray Austin's post-fight interview after recently losing to Savon. My advice to gamblers is simply this. This Solis Klitschko fight, that fight is a toss-up. Disregard the odds in the sports book. That fight is a toss-up. Solis could either win that fight by decision or by knockout. That's a dangerous fight by Vitali, That's why he's talking about fighting David Haye.